Hi, welcome back. I'm so glad to be with you today. We have one of the most compelling stories to share that I've ever been a part of. We have Andreea Parc with us. She's the author of this book, Alive Again. And just a quick snapshot, Andrea came to America from Romania when she was 22 years old. She had already been to law school, created a very successful law practice in New York City, and a very successful life, had a young daughter, and then one day it all fell apart. The police came into her office and arrested her. So listen in. You won't want to miss this. Hi, Andrea. How are you?
Hi, Teresa. Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you. I kind of don't know where to start. It's such a huge story. Um, and so I wondered if you could, just give us in a nutshell. It's a big story, but just give us in a nutshell, what happened? Why did those police come into your office? What was the backstory for that?
So, I was an attorney in New York with my own practice, and I my head was in the clouds. I was thinking of how can I be more successful? How can I make more money? How can I have more recognition and titles? And I didn't see where I was stepping. I didn't see where I was getting into. I got caught up with various clients and situations that weren't quite kosher, I would say. And that was the start of a very painful part of my life and my daughter's life that basically from the clouds I crashed. And we all have difficult times in life, but to me, crushing from such a high place was devastating.
I can completely understand that. I've had my own huge failures, and I think we all do. But can you be more specific for us here when you say you got caught up with the wrong people, you weren't paying attention? Can you open your story up a little bit for us? I know you
Yeah.
talked to me about and it was very meaningful to me that you said 20% of your law practice was helping immigrants from Romania seek asylum in the United States.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about where that went south for you?
Yes. So I had a general practice, and 25% of my practice was immigration law because I was an immigrant and I felt that is my duty to help my fellow Romanians.
Hmm.
Um, at some point in my practice, I had two families of immigrants of a certain race from Romania that I knew they were persecuted. And they were great people and they had great cases. And although I didn't know much of asylum within the immigration law, I took their cases and they were successful because they were really, really compelling cases. But when these two cases were successful, a lot of the same race clients showed up at my door. And because I had such a huge overhead, I didn't select my clients well.
Is that what you mean when you, sorry to interrupt,
Yes,
is that what you mean when you say, maybe I just wasn't paying attention. I was striving so hard for success Is that what you mean when you say I was just taking in people who would come in and I wasn't selective?
Yes, yes. I took literally every client that showed up at my door. I accepted it. And within those clients, some of them were not that they weren't of that race, but they were doing things in the US that I didn't know about.
Did you have any sense of it? You know, we always have gut checks.
Yes.
They're quiet. I know from experience
Yes.
and my failures.
I had so many signs. So I was not paying attention to the signs that God was giving me. Because I can't say that I didn't have signs. I did have signs. But I pushed through. And in my mind, I was never thinking that something like this would ever happen.
What did you think would happen?
Nothing. I've never thought that something bad would happen. I figured that they were doing something wrong when some of them didn't show up to court or I couldn't find them. And later on, I found out that they were arrested for things that weren't related to my practice. And in my mind, I said, how can something bad happen to me when I was not involved on what they were doing?
Right.
Not realizing that so many of them were involved in doing those things, and the prosecutors looked back at the immigration attorney that helped these people get papers in the U.S.
And am I right? Do I remember correctly, Andrea? Sorry again. Do I remember correctly that they were ATM crimes?
Yeah,
these people were that was a thing.
Yes, it was they were doing ATM fraud. And of course, not all of them, but some of them. And those people that were doing that, the result was that not only that I suffered as a result, but some other people of their race suffered as well.
Suffered by not being able to come into the U.S.?
By not being to come in, by their papers being delayed. Because, of course, when the prosecutors thought that I was the ringleader, of course, that the cases that I filed before were delayed. And they were, the people that were very well positioned in the society were investigated as well, along with the other ones. So somehow it was, the prosecutors created a profile of these people, and it was damaging to a lot of us.
Can you just describe what it was like the day that you were in your office and it became the biggest pivot of your life?
I found out one day that I was under investigation for immigration fraud. And I contacted an attorney, and that particular attorney spoke with the prosecutors. And I found out that they were investigating me for as being a ringleader on the ATM fraud. And sure enough, I laughed about it because it was That's the reason why I said that I've never thought that something like this would happen to me, because I knew that I was not involved in that.
Right.
And to me, it sounded like a joke. They're, how would they believe that I would be even close to being able to do that? But then they didn't have any evidence, of course, on me being the ringleader of the ATM fraud. However, they had almost 100 applications for asylum on this type, on this race, on families, on this particular race from Romania. So they charged me with asylum fraud and false statements.
Talk to me about what that means, because I think most people won't understand. You're charged with asylum fraud.
Asylum fraud. So in order for a person to qualify for asylum in the US, the person needs to prove that they were persecuted in their home country, and something really bad would happen to them if they return to their home country. And it's an initial application where they file the name, their address, and the base of their application. And then it's a second hearing with a judge where they get to tell their story to the judge. In the meantime, they get work permit in the US. It's due to the fact that there are so many people in the US filing for asylum. When I started to practice with those two families that I mentioned, the final hearing was probably about a year apart from the initial application.
Right.
Few years into my practice, already that final hearing was probably 4 or 5 years away from the initial application, because other people came, and not only from Romania, of course. From the Romania, it's a people that come from Romania, it's a very, very small percentage comparing to other countries. But due to so many applications, that 1 year period extended.
I understand.
So I filed over 100 applications. And the law says that if you file, anybody that files applications for asylum that the prosecutors believed that were fraudulent because they were too many, and they couldn't believe that all of them had a compelling case, and because most of them had more or less the same story because they were coming from the same place, it was believed that the statements that we made in those applications were false.
I see.
And somehow, putting now myself in the prosecutor's shoes, it was a way for them to take me out of this equation of helping people file their asylum applications in the US.
When you were filing that 100+ applications for that one particular race, a very small one, with all of them stating that they had suffered extreme persecution, right?
Yes.
Did it occur to you in the moments, and I know this is kind of the core of what was going on in your life, and I've been there, where you're doing so many things you just don't even notice what's happening right in front of you. I've absolutely been there. But did you think about, oh, I might be filing too many applications. Oh, this might look really unusual that I've got 100 plus from the same area, basically all saying the same thing.
My gut feeling, yes, said that. But I did not stop to actually consider what my intuition was telling me.
Right. Tough thing to have to look back and admit to oneself.
Yes.
So take us forward. Take us forward to what happened from there.
So to make the long story short, I thought that asylum fraud and false statements, the charges that they initially brought to me, that I was not guilty. And I chose my constitutional right to go to trial. I took an equity loan on my already mortgaged apartment, and I paid 2 sets of attorneys to help me with this. A month before the trial, because I did not accept to plea but went to trial, I received a superseding indictment, which it's called the penalty trial for people who choose to go to trial. And that was identity theft, which carried a mandatory minimum of 24 months.
Explain to me the connection between fraudulent asylum applications and identity theft.
There is none. And in my book, I explained not only my sentencing speech, but the appeal and the letter that the judge wrote at the appeal, where he said that he did not understand why the prosecutors charged me with identity theft, because clearly I didn't assume any of my clients' identities. But the law says that if I am using their passports in the furtherance of a crime, which was the asylum fraud, then I was also doing identity theft. This is the legal explanation.
It's hard for me to connect those dots.
Yes.
And is that the portion of your sentencing so that was a minimum of 24 months, right?
That was a minimum of 24 months, yes. And after a 2 weeks trial, I was found guilty on all charges. And the sentence was 60 months, 5 years.
5 years. And your daughter was 15 at the time, Alexa?
Yes, my daughter Alexa was 15. And because I have dual citizenship, so I left home November 19, so the week before Thanksgiving, 2018, with the idea that I will just go to the verdict and all it's going to be fine and I'll be home at night. Have not been back home for almost 3 years, because after the verdict, the judge thought that I was a flight risk because of my dual citizenship. My bail was revoked and I was taken into custody by the federal marshals, and I spent 8 months in MCC.
I want to take a pause there for just a minute. I want to read a passage I told you earlier when we were chatting as we were setting up our microphones. I was looking at your book again this morning in my hotel room, getting ready for this show, and I was reading what is actually the transcript your sentencing transcript. I don't know if I can read this without crying, I have to say. And I don't want to read to our viewers as though I'm doing a bedtime story, but this is just a profound piece. So this was, I guess the sentencing transcript happened after you had been in MCC
Yes. I've
for
been
8
in,
months?
no, for 5 months.
For 5
Altogether, I was there for 8, but the sentencing
This was at the
happened.
5-month point?
Yes.
Okay. And you said, "Thank you very much, Your Honor." And in the second paragraph, you said, "I found that I'm a totally different person now." This is after 5 months in a high-security prison. "I realized and I understood all the mistakes that I made, both in my personal life and in my professional life, and I learned a lot from them. Not only that I don't recognize the person that I was, but I can't believe that I jeopardized my life and my loved ones with my prior conduct." Then I'm going to skip a paragraph, and you said, "I strived for money and success, for recognition and titles, just to feel better about myself. That is the reason I took the title of Chief Financial Officer of Taxi Club Management. I put a strain on my daughter and on my loved ones around me, and yet I was not happy. I was not happy with my achievements. I was not grateful for what I had, and I definitely did not enjoy anything that I did." And that was part of your plea to the judge.
Yes.
It's a very unusual way to go before a judge, saying, in 5 months, in this really awful prison, I've taken a hard look at my life, and I am not who I was.
Yes, because the first night in MCC was probably the hardest day of my life. I couldn't believe what happened. And it's funny how because it's human nature, it's not just me, how we find God when we fall.
Yes. Yes. We do.
And I was there at night in a cell, and I asked God how this happened and why. And then I realized that God gave me so many chances to change and to stop and to pay attention. But I didn't. And I realized that God was there for me all the time, but I was the one that I didn't allow God to help me.
You talk in your book about that first night at MCC, and I want you to describe what MCC means in the penal system and what people think of it. But you describe a bit about that first night and how you were thrown in this cell and told to get up on a top bunk you couldn't even climb to. The mattress was filthy. The blanket was filthy. They even gave you dirty undergarments to wear. You're coming from a situation of being a very successful lawyer, living in one of the biggest cities in the world, hard to make it, and you had made it. And suddenly you're in a situation, in a cell, and you never went home. You went from that trial directly to MCC. Am I right?
Yes. Yes.
And that same night, the same night after the trial that you thought, I'm going back home to my daughter, this is all going to be made right, you're sleeping on a filthy mattress in a cell, wearing somebody else's dirty clothes.
Yes. And MCC, going back to your first question, MCC stands for Metropolitan Correctional Center. And it's the place where a lot of people went through, including when I was there, El Chapo was there, and Jeffrey Epstein died the following year. And it's the place where it's a maximum security holding facility where people go through before sentencing.
So talk to us about what it was like in MCC.
It's funny that, and I mentioned this in the book, that the first prison that I went in as an attorney to see a client was MCC. And
It's ironic, right?
yes, and I was terrified. I couldn't run faster outside of the building. Um, the the smell, the cold, the terrifying guards. The elevator was metal with fenced inside. It's the only elevator that I've ever seen where they can lock people in the elevator.
That's right.
And it was the same as I remembered, but that night I couldn't run anywhere. What else can I tell you about MCC? That it was a terrifying place. And my mind couldn't stop thinking of how will I be able to survive there.
I have to interrupt because it's interesting to me that, I mean, it's such a jarring, such a shocking thing to happen all in one day. And for most of us, myself included, when big shocking things happen, we shut down. We become paralyzed. We become fearful. We resent it. We push back against it. And what I hear you saying is that almost immediately, even that first night, you were trying to figure out, how do I survive? You weren't folding in on it. You weren't giving up. Is that right?
During the trial, I was in shock and I could not speak. I was not able even to say my name. So between the trial, when I couldn't say my name, and the sentencing, when I was able to have that speech with the judge, was a huge transformation. And why? Because, as I mentioned, I asked myself, now what? I didn't have the power that I had before. I couldn't make any phone call to anybody to take me out of there. I realized that it was just me and my higher power.
So did you grow up with a strong belief system in a higher power? What took you to that so immediately?
I realized that yes, I grew up with my grandmother. I grew up religious in a way, but not to the point where I felt that night. I felt and I started to feel God within myself. And when I heard the story of my cellmate, I realized that my story is temporary. I'm blessed that I have my life, that my daughter is alive and healthy, that my parents are alive, and that whatever happens, if I was there and I was alive, it means that God has a plan for me. Because as I said, I had several signs before. I even had a health scare back in 2013. And that didn't stop me at all.
You were striving for money, success, achievements, right?
Yes.
And
And
nothing stopped you.
nothing stopped me. And this was God's way to take the power away from me, to take myself out of my life, basically.
I want to backtrack for a minute because you know, when we talk about your striving for success, I mean, I think we all strive for success in some way or another, and then things happen in life and success has a different definition for us, as I know it does for you now. You know, I think it begs us to look a little bit, and you and I've talked about this before. It begs us to look at how you were raised. You were raised in Romania, and in your early years, it was a communist country, right?
Yes.
You were predominantly raised by your grandmother because your parents were both very successful, very driven people. And there was the expectation that you would absolutely be successful no matter what.
That's correct. Yes.
Tell me the story about what you really wanted to do with your life. And your dad said, no way, you won't make enough money.
I graduated fine arts high school, and I wanted to become a fashion designer, an artist. But my dad said, no, that said against it. No, an artist is not a profession. You need to make money in life, and you won't be able, especially in Romania, to make money with fashion design. And you have to go to law school.
So
And
this
this
was never your dream.
no,
Being a designer, being an artist was your dream.
yes. And nobody in my family was an attorney. But being after the communist fall, being an attorney became something very interesting. And a lot of people in my generation actually went to law school.
And you adopted, I guess, that value of your dad's, that success, wealth, achievement. Those were the things to define you, not going after your dreams, your artistic dreams.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And in our culture, you do failure is not an option, and you do and you push through until you get what you want. That's the reason
And so
why.
that was exactly what you were doing, right?
Yes, and that's the reason why I took the bar exam 8 times. Some
Wow.
people would have dropped out of it after
Yeah.
a few tries. No, I tried 8 times, and I passed the New York bar exam on the 8th try. And I didn't stop. After every failure, I would say, well, just pull myself up and try again, and try again, and try again until...
So I'm curious. I know your parents were living when you were sentenced and when you went to prison. What was the reaction of your parents, your dad?
I guess the suffering that they went through was definitely higher than mine.
Really?
When I didn't talk to them about that then, but when I went back to Romania the first time, it was the first time I've seen my dad cry. And I know that my mother developed a heart condition when she heard what happened. And it was definite, even now for them, it's very hard to talk about what happened to me.
Do you think your father takes any responsibility for pushing you the way he did?
No,
No.
no,
Okay.
because he didn't do it to push me. He didn't do it because he thought that that's the best thing for me to do.
He did it because he thought it was the best thing for you.
It was the best thing, yes, yes. Like we all do things in life because we think are the best things.
Right. So one other place I have to ask, because as a mother of two boys and, I just grieve for what your daughter had to be going through at 15, thinking her mom was coming home that night, and then she went to a high security prison. Did you have a chance to tell your story to Alexa in a way that a teenage girl could metabolize it or get her arms around it?
At that point, immediately after what happened, no, because I was in shock and I couldn't explain anything. For the first month, probably, it took me time. I took time for myself to understand what was happening to me.
Yeah.
But after that, yes, and I explained to her, and we spoke about it. For her age, she was and she still is very, very understanding and open-minded.
So did you feel, or do you feel, that your parents and Alexa felt you were guilty or innocent?
They all think that I am not guilty of what the final verdict was.
Thank you, Andrea. Powerful story. Thank you for sharing with us today. Let's leave it right there. Remember, Andreea Parc, Alive Again. You're going to want to run out and get this book, and we'll return to the story next week. Thank you.